Politics and ethics. America, your nation is dying because you have weak and lazy ethics. Ethics? Huh? What does that even mean? Ethics is an abstract noun that gets tossed around a lot without people really knowing what it means. What is an abstract noun? Abstract nouns are things that we have words for, but that don't really exist in reality. They only exist in our minds. Things like love, government, mass media, corporations, and, well, minds. Quick, point to your mind! You probably pointed to your head, because that's where your brain is. In Eastern cultures, they point to their chest, because that's where they experience all those weird feelings when they experience strong emotions. But in reality, the mind doesn't really exist in any physical form. That's because it's an abstract noun. So what is ethic? The word ethic is often used to describe a set of moral standards for society, used in contexts like the ethics of cloning, or the ethics of using war as a foreign policy. Here I'm using the word ethics in the ancient Greek sense, as in the word ethos or ethokosis. In this sense, it describes moral duty or obligation. It also describes a fundamental state of being, much like the Sanskrit word dharma, that thing that makes us what we are. Now, our display of that thing that makes us what we are is rather weak these days. Do you need proof? Well, look no further than February 9th, 2010's episode of The Daily Show. Newt Gingrich was a guest on that show, and he advocated many times that we should do away with our system of justice and replace it with a kangaroo court system, in which the guilty are assumed to be guilty until executed. And he took the position that we should abandon the ethos of our founding fathers in order to keep Americans safe. Now, when folks in government start saying that we need to abandon the rule of law being the one thing that keeps those who are in government from doing whatever the fuck they want, I don't think we're headed down a path of increased security. Increased security from would-be terrorists, perhaps, but with every inch we move down that slippery slope towards autocracy, we face a disproportionately larger increase in danger coming from our very own government, that thing which is supposedly acting to keep us safe. Now, I could simply cite a truism here from Benjamin Franklin, a founding father, his little quip about those who would sacrifice liberty for safety deserving neither. But let's actually delve into that quote for a bit and do some unpacking. I would posit that if you sacrifice liberty for safety, that you not only deserve neither, but that you will get neither. Why? Well, now comes the unpacking of meaning. First we have to ask, what is liberty? What is safety? And how does this truism work itself out in real-life contexts? Or does it? Now, liberty, or freedom, or whatever you want to call it, is not an unlimited freedom. It is most certainly bound within the laws of physics, for one. It's also bound within what you are capable of doing. So essentially, your freedom is your ability to exercise your free will, to do what you can with what you have, where you are. Now, our founding father had a working assumption that all people are born free. All people. The wording that they used to cement this notion was that all men are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That is to say, all people are free simply by existing. Even under dictatorships, one will always have the ability to control one's own conduct, and either go along with what others tell you to do, to resist, to flee, etc. Often when faced with the ultimatum of doing something against their ethics or facing death, people will say that they have no choice in the matter. This is false. You can always choose not to do the thing that is against your ethics. In the book and the film Everything is Illuminated, we learn of Nazis marching into a small Ukrainian town populated by Jews, and giving the town's residents the ultimatum of desecrating their holy books or be shot. Many, thinking they could escape being shot, did as they were commanded. A small number refused to do so. As we learn, every single one of them was brutally murdered anyway, whether they chose to give up their dignity or not. Now that's a compelling example, but what exactly does it mean? Where's the freedom here? Was their freedom taken from them? No, freedom cannot be taken from you. It needs to be given up willingly. The folks in that town who chose to desecrate those holy books chose to give up their own free will and take on the will of another person. They chose to do as commanded. One can always choose to refuse to comply with unethical demands. This is a fundamental freedom that all human beings have. Our founding fathers understood this. They refused to comply with what they felt were unjust and unethical laws, and through their refusal to go along with the demands of the British government, they created a new reality in which the American colonies were free from colonial rule. Gandhi also understood this. His repeated refusal to comply with unjust laws and his standing in open defiance of them helped to create a free India. Martin Luther King Jr. understood this. He also refused to comply with unjust laws, and like Gandhi before him, sought to create an alternative reality through his own personal actions. Rosa Parks refused to comply with laws that were unjust. Now, if laws that were made by men were like the laws of physics, it would have been simply impossible for her to refuse to go to that back seat of the bus. But laws made by men are not real. They are abstractions. They are simply ideas that are impressed upon a society and enforced by consequences provided by men. It's the fact that a majority of citizens living within a society choose to comply with a law that makes it enforceable, that makes it real. Anybody, at any point, can choose not to comply with any man-made law. That is free will. I think that these examples are sufficient enough to prove that true liberty cannot be taken from any person but must be given up willingly. So let's go back to this balancing act between safety and freedom. Well, of course we have to ask the question, what is safety? True safety, or removal of all risk, is never going to be achievable. Risk is inherent in life. There are things that we can do to mitigate the risk that we encounter in day-to-day life. We can reduce our risk of death by traffic collision by using seatbelts and airbags. We can reduce our risk of dying of poor health by eating properly and exercising regularly. But there are some things that we will never have control over. Random things like meteors falling from the sky, or the free will of other individuals. For instance, we will never be able to eliminate the risk of other people exercising their free will to violate man-made laws against things like murder or mugging. Now, those who choose to engage in such activities do have consequences that will be provided for them later by government, but there's nothing that will ever prevent them from choosing to engage in such an activity, unless we can somehow eliminate free will from society, which is not a society that I'd like to live in.
I sell t-shirts, do 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 do.